And welcome to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. I am Vince D'Addario. That guy over there, I can see him bend my wrist a little more, is Brian Driscoll. He is the publisher at irishbreakdown.com. It's Tuesday, which means we are going to push forward with talking about Notre Dame's next opponent, and that is the Virginia Tech Hokies, as Notre Dame hits the road to face a pretty darn good Virginia Tech team. I almost purposely don't look too far ahead. So, last night and today were the first chance I really got to kind of watch and study Virginia Tech. This is not a pushover game by any stretch of the imagination. This is going to be a game that's going to test Notre Dame, especially coming off the way that they played on Saturday. But today we are going to talk the Notre Dame offense versus the Virginia Tech defense. And obviously they don't have their acclaimed Hall of Fame or, defensive coordinator there anymore. But the fingerprint, I would say, is still there. Brian, would you agree with me? I think Brian Kelly believes that anyway.
That's one thing Coach Kelly was correct on. I think that I think that he's in a situation where I don't often listen to Brian Kelly in press conferences, but this is one he was correct on. It still very much has some of the Bud Foster DNA. You and I were talking, it's not as aggressive as Bud Foster's defense, which was just like attack, but structurally it's, philosophically, meaning speed, attacking with speed, don't care about being big.
Right.
Don't care, we care about speed. That philosophy, 4-2-5, playing a lot of cover 4 robber, starting off with too high and then rolling a lot of robbing with your safeties and changing the eye discipline of the quarterbacks. Those are all things that to me are staples of what Bud Foster did.
Sure, absolutely.
That are still there with Justin Hamilton running the defense. But it's also his DNA. He is more, I would say, a little bit more sound than Coach Foster was, but they're still vulnerable to the big play, as we saw against West Virginia. But, that's I would say that's a very, very accurate statement.
Absolutely. So we're not going to do our recruiting thing today. We're going to jump right into the run game. So the Notre Dame run offense, and I'm really trying hard not to I'm trying to keep a straight face here when I talk about Notre Dame's run offense versus Virginia Tech's run defense. I was very impressed with Virginia Tech's run defense. Wait, let me rephrase that. I was very impressed with their front. Their front four can get after it, and it trickles down to the rest of the defense. It's very similar to what when we talk about Notre Dame and what their front is able to do and how it trickles down to the linebackers in the secondary and how they're able to do their thing, based on what the front is up to. It's very much what Virginia Tech is like. Their front is the key to what they want to do defensively. And from what I saw, the key is flowing. Their defense is good because the front is so good.
Yeah, that's where it starts for me. And look, they're not the biggest D line. I'm pulling up the depth chart right now that's at irishbreakdown.com. They've got decent size up the middle. They got Jordan Williams, who's the Clemson transfer that Notre Dame's going to be very familiar with. They recruited him out of high school. He obviously played a lot at Clemson. He's a grad transfer. He's a kid that's 6'5", 285. He rotates a lot with Norrell Pollard, who's a really good football player, was good for them last year. It's a really nice combination up the middle. That's number 3, Vince. He's 6 foot 281. They're starting D tackle Mario Kendricks. That's number 22. We were talking about him before the show. He's 6 foot 290. He's a little bowling ball.
He comes off the ball hard, though, man.
Yeah, he does. They bring a kid, Josh Fuga, off the bench, who's the biggest guy they have. He's a redshirt freshman that's 6'2", 308. Not huge. Their ends are 6'1", 252, and 6'6", 245. That's Amari Barno. We're going to talk about him a lot more in the pass game section. But it's a really quick – with the exception of Jordan Pollard and Amari Barno, the rest of their D-line is 5'11", 6'2", 6 foot, 6'1", 6'1", right? It's in some ways, they remind me a lot of Notre Dame's D-line from just there's not a lot of big guys. There's that one big guy, but just a lot of quick, athletic guys. It's not as talented as Notre Dame's defensive line, but you don't have to be to have success against the Notre Dame offensive line.
No,
But it's going to be one of the more athletic, aggressive D lines that Notre Dame will have faced this season, which is a lot different than maybe what they faced against Wisconsin and that kind of thing. This is going to
more
be
like a
completely
bull rush
different
type.
field. This is just going to be speed and quickness and getting into gaps and knocking you back, winning the leverage battle. They take advantage of their lack of size, where the positions where they have a lack of size. They play with really good leverage, get up underneath pads. It's a good group, and it's been the backbone of this defense so far. Which, look, as you're going to see, this number right here, rush defense, not their best part, but as you get into this passing defense and the overall defense, this is the best defense left on the schedule, and one of the 3 or 4 best they're going to face all year.
Sure, and that's dangerous for this offense because I don't have a whole lot of faith in what's happening up front, obviously, with Notre Dame. And they are going to, look, they're not going to bring all kinds of exotic blitzes and things like that at this Notre Dame run offense. They're just going to be fundamentally sound in what they do. And they're going to be athletic and they're going to be quick off the ball. And look, if I'm going to beat Notre Dame's front, offensive front, being quick off the ball, that alone will get you a good chunk of the way there.
Right.
And so that's what really worries me is they are so fast off the snap.
Yeah.
And that's what jumped out at me as I was watching the film originally was they're so fast off the ball and they get into you so fast. And when the problem across the board for Notre Dame is they jump up, they get high. And if somebody's quick off the ball and they can get into your chest as you jump up, you're done. You have no leverage anymore, and they're going to be able to reset the line of scrimmage down into the backfield, and you can kiss the run game goodbye. So that's what worries me the most about this particular matchup. Well, and I mean, any part of the offense, Notre Dame's offense versus their defense matchup, but specifically in the run game, because if you're getting pushed back into the backfield, it screws up everything that you want to do in the run game.
Well, and their overall numbers are a tad misleading in my opinion, because when you look at West Virginia, for example, West Virginia rushed for 180 yards, 5.5 yards per carry. Well, on the first drive of the game, it might have been the first or second play of the game, they went for 80-yard touchdown. Well, the next 32 carries, they went for 3.1 yards per attempt. I mean, the thing that frustrates me, Vince, about this matchup, if we're being honest, is the fact that this shouldn't be a matchup that we're so concerned about. That Virginia Tech has a nice defense. Like it's a good defense, and it's a good defensive line, but it's the kind of defensive line that a typical Notre Dame offensive line would be able to find some success against.
Right.
From the standpoint of they would do to them what they did in 2018, which is Virginia Tech's athleticism, their penetration, their aggressive style is going to result in some negatives. It's going to result in some mistakes.
Sure.
But it's also going to result in you pushing them off the ball and ripping off some big plays. Remember, obviously, Notre Dame had the 97-yard touchdown run against Virginia Tech, but they put that game away in the fourth quarter with another long touchdown run from Dexter Williams, where Notre Dame just started leaning on him and leaning on him. And a game that was competitive for a while turned into a rout because Notre Dame just put them away with their run game. So to me, this is a matchup that right now I do not like for Notre Dame, but that's just because I'm going to say that about every team that they play now until they prove that they can run the ball. This is a good quality rush defense. It's not an elite rush defense. Gave up 146 to North Carolina. That was a good performance. They just gave up 160 to Richmond. I'm shocked if Notre Dame can equal what Richmond did against them right now, based on what we've seen. Now, let's take a different angle on that, Vince. And the way that I look at it is this: if you look at it from the flip side argument, we've talked about this. There's going to be a game where Notre Dame is going to put it all together, right? It's going to happen. There's going to be a game where they put it all together.
I'm glad you're confident.
I'm not saying it's going to happen, right? Like even teams that aren't good have that game where it all clicks. There's going to come a game this season where it's just going to all click for them. If it's this game, then I do think Notre Dame can run the ball effectively enough to force the safeties to come down in the box and defend the run. That's my biggest fear. My biggest fear of this game from a match, and when I talk fear, I'm talking about from a football standpoint, right? My biggest fear from in this matchup is that they're able to control the run game with the box. The box for Virginia Tech being, because they are a traditional 4-2-5 defense.
Right.
You know, they have two inside linebackers that are athletic, especially Alan Tisdale. They're two inside linebackers. To people that follow Notre Dame recruiting, you're gonna know who they are. It's Dax Holyfield, and it's Hollyfield, excuse me, and it's Alan Tisdale, who Notre Dame liked a lot as their rover. As a rover recruit, they couldn't get him into school. He ends up going to Virginia Tech. Really good, really athletic football player. So, you know, I think at times this year, Vince, you and I were talking before the show. They've struggled at times getting off blocks.
Yeah, absolutely.
They've gotten better in recent games, but at times they look a lot like Notre Dame's defensive linebackers did last year. At times, where they just kind of run into blocks and they don't get off.
Right.
Now, my concern is that that's against lines that are getting their backer, their guards up to the second level. Notre Dame hasn't been doing that. If they let those two kids run free and they can defend with their 4-2 box, that allows them to keep their safeties outside to protect against the pass. Ideally, if Notre Dame can have some early success, and it doesn't have to be ripping off 40-yard runs, but if Notre Dame can, have a 16-yard gain early, just get some success in the ground game.
Yeah.
And force those robber safeties to be focused on the run game, I think that's where Notre Dame can have some success in other parts of the game. But they're going to have to come out and do that early. They're going to have to be assignment correct, and they're just going to have to play hard. That's it. That's all you need to do because, like I said, this isn't a huge defensive line for Virginia Tech, but it is very quick. It's very athletic, and they're geared towards shutting down your run game. Like that's the number one priority that you can tell with what they want to do with their defense is they want to stop you from running the football.
Yeah, and any other year as I'm watching the Virginia Tech defense do their thing, any other year against Notre Dame, I'm like, okay, Notre Dame's going to have some success in the run game, and it'll probably parlay to the pass game, et cetera. I just don't have that feeling this year, just based on everything that we've seen so far from Notre Dame. And that's what worries me the most is because I feel like they can have success running the football against Virginia Tech. You can use their aggressiveness against them and be successful. And if you can get to the next level, you can block these linebackers because they don't come off blocks very well, at least from what I saw. And so, you can have success, especially with the two guys that you're handing the ball off to. So I see where you're coming from. I'm just not sure I have that faith that that's going to
again,
occur.
I'm not saying that it's going to happen, right?
Yeah,
you keep saying like you have the faith. I'm not saying I have that faith. I'm looking at this matchup and I'm breaking down the film and I'm saying if this is the game that it happens, right?
Then they can have success.
Then that's where they can have success. I'm not predicting that they're going to have success until Notre Dame actually runs the ball on anyone. I mean anyone. Because right now the season best is what? 132 yards against Toledo.
Yeah, exactly.
43 of which came on one carry. No, Notre Dame hasn't run the ball on anybody so far this year. I'm not predicting anything. Having said that, I'm not just going to come out here and say they suck. They're going to suck. They're going to suck for the rest of the year. Quit watching our show.
No, we don't want that.
The fact is that the things that Notre Dame is doing are correctable. And if they are able to correct them, this is a defense that you can run on, and that's the point. That's what I'm trying to bring to the conversation.
No, they can run on this team. And they have the ability to run on this team. They just have to show it. I mean, that's the bottom line is they need to show it. And you're right. If they cannot get the run game going, they're not going to have a whole lot of success in this game offensively because you're playing right into Virginia Tech's hands. And they have a pretty good secondary, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But you have to force them to bring somebody else in the box. That's the only way you're going to have success offensively.
That is with any 4-2-5 team that plays robber coverage with their defense. The big danger that you have is that their safeties are having to insert into the box to defend the run. That's where the big plays come in the pass game. And we saw that at times with Clark Lee's defense, right? When the box was struggling at times to kind of handle the run, and they'd have to start getting Kylo Hamilton a little bit more, peeking into the backfield last year, Vince. We'd see that'd be the chances where they could take their one-on-one shots outside because you don't have as much safety help. And that's why being able to run the ball with some level of success against a 4-2-5 is so important. And it's why it's important to not get beat by the box. That's the big thing. And so when we talk about box, I'm referring to, guys that are basically attached to the line of scrimmage. The way that Virginia Tech, the way that they play they're a traditional 4-2-5 in their base alignment, which means 4 defensive linemen, 2 edge players. They do a lot of – it looks a lot – I mean, honestly, it looks a lot like what Clark Lee did from an alignment standpoint. You know, their weak side end is a stand-up guy, right? You know, that's Barno. They have 3 downs at that, you know, with him. They have 2 inside backers, and their rover is a guy that's out of the box a lot.
Yeah.
They occasionally will tuck inside, and they'll bring that other safety down and kind of play like a 4-3. But in a lot of ways, structurally, he's from the same family of where Clark Lee and Mike Elko's defense comes from, right? And so was Bud Foster. But this defense is even more so of a traditional 4-2-5 than Bud Foster's, because Bud Foster threw a lot of hybrid looks at people. You know, I don't see Justin Hamilton coming out in an eagle front and we don't need to explain that, but that's a strange front where they kind of reduced. It's like you got somebody over the center and both guards. You have one guy over the center and a guy over both guards, and they did a lot of that against Notre Dame in 2018 early on and gave Notre Dame some problems, but also was a reason that Notre Dame was able to rip off a couple big runs, because you get through that first level and there's nobody else there.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what happened to them against Virginia Tech, you know, West Virginia. Early on, it looked a lot like what Notre Dame did to them. So they started off in like a 2 receivers to the left and a receiver to the right, and you had the tight end and the wing. And then the tight end motions out. So he goes from a wing position, he motions out to make like a wide trips bunch. The rover, I think it was the rover, goes out with him. Safety then bumps out, and they just run inside zone right up the crease. Linebacker steps here. The kid makes a cut off the linebacker, right? And just like Kyron Williams did on the first play against Cincinnati. And then there was literally nobody else in the middle of the field. You know, so can Notre Dame do that? Can they take advantage of that? That's why I think that what you and I talked about yesterday, Vince, is going to be super important. Is if Tommy Rees comes out and says, hey, we're going to go 12 personnel and we're going to try to force feed this and we're going to do that like he's been doing, they're not going to have success on offense. If he finally says, my best players are Michael Mayer and a bunch of receivers and running backs, that's it. Like if you looked at it, I would argue the way that they've been playing so far and the talent level that we see of other guys, I would argue that you'd have to get to like 8-9 in skill players at least before I'm going to talk about putting one of the other tight ends in that conversation after Mayer. Would you disagree with that? I mean, I'm taking the 3 starting receivers. I'm putting Joe Wilkins. I'm putting both running backs. I'm putting Deion Colsey. I'm putting Lorenzo Styles. And I'd even consider having a conversation about whether or not we should put Logan Diggs in there in that conversation based on what we know of him before I'd get to a second tight end. Based on what we've
absolutely.
Seen. That's where I'm coming from.
Because right now, the second tight end doesn't do anything for you in the pass game because they're not throwing it to him, and they're not doing anything in the run game because they're not very good at blocking.
So think about how far down the list of players we'd have to go, you know, skill players we have to get to before you can justify having your second tight end on the field.
Right.
That's my point. So why are you putting a guy that's like maybe 9th or 10th best skill player on your offense at best on the field for more than 5 snaps a game that aren't short yardage or goal line? You know what I mean? So that's where we're coming from. Think about that for a second. You've got Mayer in that top group, and I want to ask anybody, would you put the way they're playing right now, George Takis or Mitchell Evans in there over any of those skill players we just listed? You know, like, and if they're not going to block, as we said yesterday, then put Kane Barong in the game because I know he can run routes and catch the football.
Right.
But anyway, the point being, they need to take advantage of, hey, what do you do best? Right? Who are your best players? And how do you build your offense around them? If they do that in the run game, Vince, then I think they can have some success. If they accent their RPO game a little bit more, right? Build it just a little bit more. They've done it all. Put it all in one game. Don't just do the one stupid look screen, the now screen the whole game off your RPO. That's not going to work.
Right.
You can do that at times, but like I remember the 2018 game. I was talking with can't tell you who I was talking with last night, but I was talking with somebody last night. We were talking about the Virginia Tech game in 2018, and I was like, you remember that play where they had a 3rd and 10 against Virginia Tech, and they ran an RPO bubble screen, and Ian read it perfectly, threw it to Cole Kmet. Cole Kmet ran a bubble screen and converted a 3rd and 10 off an RPO, right? Like, seriously. You're telling me Avery Davis can't do that?
Right.
Tell me Brady Linsky. Cole Kmet, a tight end. Now, again, he's a great tight end, but he's a tight end that caught a bubble screen. You know, so that to me is get your skill players in the field, build your run game around that, spread them out, force their safeties to go out wide, and see if you can get some action going there. That's what I think they need to do. That's the only hope that I see them having in the run game. If they do that and they're hitting the RPOs like they hit against the RPOs against Virginia Tech in 2018, then I think this football team has a chance to finally get going. Will they do it? I have no idea. And until they actually do it, I'm going to be skeptical.
Sure.
But we're
absolutely.
telling you all that's the path forward for Notre Dame.
And a path where they can be pretty successful. That's my issue is they can be successful. They just have to come to grips with who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that can be difficult when you have gone the whole offseason, thinking you know who you are, and then you've played 5 games and you're like, okay, we're not that team.
Yeah.
And we need to change some things up. Look, there's a lot of ego that goes into being a coach, right? You don't want to be wrong, but there's also some humility that needs to take place at times too.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not in the coaches' meetings and things like that, but they need to come to grips with who they are, and they need to embrace it.
Yes.
That's my biggest thing is they need to embrace it, man. Just flush the egos. It's okay. You're not who you thought you were.
Right.
Okay, but you could still be pretty darn good.
Right. And if Mayer's here's the other kind of rub on this. If Michael Mayer's banged up and he can't play or he can't play a full allotment of snaps this weekend, then it really gets interesting.
Oh, absolutely.
And when it comes to, but that'll affect the pass game even more. But even in the run game, like, okay, do you start going 20 personnel? 20 personnel being 2 backs, 3 receivers? Or do you just say, hey, we're still going to go 11 and 12 personnel. We're just not going to use Mayer as much. I mean, that's my fear is like at this point in time, I'm almost assuming the worst a lot.
Yeah.
With them. So that's kind of my question, Vince. But at the end of the day, I think this one is if anyone's being honest with themselves, you have a Virginia Tech team that's been pretty salty against the run this year. Been pretty, at the very least solid against the run this year. Held North Carolina to 146, shut down Middle Tennessee State as they should. Gave up 160 against Richmond on 36 carries, 4.4 yards per carry. Virginia, you look at West Virginia went for $180. 80 that came on one play. They've been a solid run defense this year. Solid at times, good at times, giving up too many big plays at other times. But there's no way that anyone can justify to me that this should be anything other than advantage Virginia Tech. And this number down here is the thing that concerns me the most. This one right here. They're pretty good at creating tackles for loss, and Notre Dame is really bad at stopping teams from getting tackles for loss.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So I think you have to go advantage Virginia Tech on this one, Vince. Do you have a different way you'd go with it?
No.
Okay.
I don't foresee myself, unless something drastic changes, I don't foresee myself giving the advantage to Notre Dame in the run game offensively for quite a few weeks. So
I don't know. When's the Navy game?
Right, exactly. That's the only time I can even foresee it. And like I said, unless things change, maybe they do have the breakout game today, and we're having a different discussion. I'll tell you when I will take it is next week. Notre Dame will definitely win the run game against the bye.
I don't know. I can see someone getting hurt walking into their dorm or something. So, it's not. I mean, I didn't expect them to be a great rushing team this year.
Sure,
but I don't see how anyone could have expected what we've seen. It's abysmal.
Right.
So Vince, let's dive into the pass game. Let's dive into the pass game matchup for Virginia Tech. This is the one that we've been kind of looking at recent weeks and saying, hey, this is the area where Notre Dame's going to be able to find some success. If they're going to win these games and have success, they're going to throw the football effectively. And they haven't really thrown the football effectively. And they're going against a Virginia Tech defense that this is kind of what they've been pretty good at this year so far.
Yeah, absolutely.
The only team that's thrown the ball effectively on them from a number standpoint is Middle Tennessee State. Middle Tennessee threw for 283 on them.
Because they couldn't run the ball, so they were just chucking it all over the place.
Right.
Yeah,
and North Carolina went for 208. Sam Howell threw 1 touchdown, 3 picks,
and he looked rushed because of the front. Right. You know what I mean? Like he was running for his life most of the time, and actually turned it into a few nice little scrambles. But there was one time he threw a pick when he was being sacked. He was being harassed by that front, and that's what worries me. Mm-hmm. That's what really if Sam Howell, who I think we can all agree is probably better than anybody Notre Dame has on the roster, I'll just say it. If he is running for his life and is not able to connect on some stuff, that's what worries me about the pass game for Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, that's a legitimate concern. And, Virginia Tech had 6 sacks that game. They've had like 3 and 2 in the 2 games since. They haven't, or the 3 games since. They haven't had a similar performance, partly because teams have been smart enough to get the ball out quickly.
Exactly. And that's what Notre Dame has to do.
Right.
They have to get rid of the football.
West Virginia went 15 of 27 for 193 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a score. And one of their touchdowns was into double coverage. The guy made a great catch on a ball. And then Richmond went 13 of 23 for 77 yards. So, you look at this Virginia Tech team and the yards per attempt that they've allowed this season so far, 6.3, 7.1, 7.1, and 3.3 in every game. That's really good. That's a really quality number if you look at it. And so this has been a good pass defense so far, Vince. 5 interceptions in 4 games is a good number against the Notre Dame offense. Has thrown 3 interceptions the last 2 games, or just 2? Was it just the 2 the last game? I can't remember if they threw one against Wisconsin. Now that I've tried to block these last couple games out of my mind.
I don't think they did throw one against Wisconsin.
Because they have 5 on the season, right? And so they threw 2. Yeah, so they had 1 against Florida State. They've thrown 4. 1 against Florida State, 1 against Toledo, and then 2 against Cincinnati.
There you go.
So and then you look at Notre Dame's yards per attempt. The first 2 games, they were elite, 10.5 and 8.8. In the 3 games since, they've been 7.0, 6.5, and 5.6.
Going the wrong direction.
Virginia Tech is a team that forces a lot of inefficiency in the pass game. Notre Dame's offense is a team that's had a lot of inefficiency in the pass game. Notre Dame's completion percentage the last 3 games, 46.9, 56.8, 50.0. The guy that most people think is going to be the savior of the offense went 9 of 22 throwing the football against Cincinnati's defense last week. And I'll make this statement. I think that Cincinnati probably has a slightly better front. I would argue that other than Ahmed Gardner, who's better than any corner Notre Dame's going to face by far, but as a whole unit, I would argue that that Virginia Tech to me is as good, if not better, than Virginia Tech in the secondary, other than Ahmed Gardner. Like if you take him out of the equation, he's better than Jermaine Waller, right? Okay. But you look at the safeties, the nickel, and the other corner in the pass game, where I think the Cincinnati kids are really good is in the run game. But in the pass game, I would say that the Virginia Tech kids are better, in my opinion. And Notre Dame had a hard time beating him. Now, the good news is there's no Ahmed Gardner. Jermaine Waller's a really good football player. He's not Ahmed Gardner. So I think the only guy that they're going to face all year that remotely resembles Ahmed Gardner is a kid that they're playing in practice every day, and that's Cam Hart.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
So at least you don't have that. But this is a really good salty pass defense, Vince. That's been good in my opinion, just about especially against the Power 5 teams, but they were good against West Virginia. They were good against North Carolina.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, a lot of those hurries and things, yes, it had to do with the front of Virginia Tech, no question. But it also had to do with the fact that I think a lot of it were coverage situations. There was nowhere for Howell to go with the football. And that's part of the problem. So, I don't like, I don't want Drew Pine, if he's the starter, to just sit back there and try to pick apart this defense, because I don't think that is going to end the way that they would like it to end. I think that they need to take advantage of his quick release, and they just need to be getting the ball out, whether it's look screens, tunnel screens, whether it's, quick slants, RPOs, you name it. And then you can stretch the field a little bit. I'm not saying don't do it at all. But I'm talking like 1-2 read type stuff, something that's quick so that he's not a sitting duck back there. Yes, he's more mobile than Jack Cohn. Sure. But this front is very athletic, and I don't want to get into a battle of, I hope Drew can outrun everybody, because that's not going to end well for Notre Dame either. So I really hope that the offensive game plan is, hey, let's take advantage of Drew's quick release. Let's get it out. Let's get it into the hands of the playmakers, and let's see what happens, because I think that they can make Virginia Tech miss in space. I have seen that, okay? But I have not seen them not be sticky as far as being in pass defense. So get the ball out. Let's make them miss in space. That would be my plan if I'm going up against this Virginia Tech defense.
Yeah. Here's some things I think Notre Dame should do, Vince, and I'm with you on that. I think a lot of the stuff I'm looking at is a lot like what you have. So I've written down, I've written RPOs down. Look, we saw it in 2018. Teams can be effective with RPOs, right? I have screens and jets, right? Those are things I like. That's a lot like what you're referring to, right? So quick screens and jets. I think that they need to do a lot of motion. I think that Virginia Tech is a team that if you do shifts and motions, you can kind of get them to be talking mid-sentence. And I like motions where you're motioning and then quickly snapping a ball at times, motioning, maybe bring them back across. Maybe if you're going to use 2 tight ends, shift them and then motion. I mean, there's some things you can do. I don't love the shifts and motions because I don't think Notre Dame does anything out of it that causes anyone to be concerned about it. They haven't run any jets out of it. They haven't, nothing like that. When they go 12 personnel, especially when they've put Joe Alt in the game, teams know that they're 95% chance they're going to run it. So they don't really worry about the motion as much. But in your normal base offense, I do like the idea of doing things where you bring a guy down and stack them. Maybe you got Avery Davis in the slot and Braden Lindsey outside, and you got Avery on the line, and you have Braden off the line. You motion him in to where now you get into your bunch from a motion. Whereas right now Notre Dame is running their tight bunch stuff out of just lining up a tight bunch. I think to me that plays in the defense's hands when that's really all you do, because we as a defense, we can look at that and say, okay, we're going to play outside. We see everything that's going on. We're going to play outside. We're going to communicate to the safeties and the backers, hey, look, we're in bunch. We're protecting outside. Keep your eyes on the meshes, right? And they can pass them off. If you start off in a wider alignment and then you kind of motion to that, they don't have as much time to adjust the leverage advantage that they've now lost, right, on some of those things.
Right.
They don't have as much time for communication on some of those things. Maybe you put doubles into the boundary and you got Avery Davis lined up, tight in the slot, and you put motion across, or you can have him outside and you put Avery into the boundary, and then Avery comes in and you get into a bunch that way. So I mean, there's a lot of things they need to do to be creative. Look, here's the deal. You can't scheme your way into success right now with the way your offensive line is playing from the standpoint of a traditional offense, right? You're not going to be able to just drop back and run a bunch of really creative vertical stuff because you can't protect the quarterback.
Yep.
So you have to do things pre-snap that can create confusion with the defense, right? That's the difference between a college and an NFL defense. I mean, and in the NFL, they got way more time to prepare for all that stuff. Well, the reality is Virginia Tech hasn't seen any of that really right now. And so to me, I'm throwing different personnel groups at them. I'm throwing different alignments out of that. I'm putting Kyron Williams out in the slot.
Yes.
I'm putting Chris Tyree out in the slot. I'm doing things like we saw in the spring game, bring Chris Tyree in a motion, run your tight end off, have him run a pivot route, and you're isolated. Where's that been, right? That's there for the taking. I mean, like on Saturday, I would have loved to have seen that, where you run Ahmed Gardner off and you get Chris Tyree in space or Kyron Williams in the space against Darian Beavers. I like that matchup. They kept doing it from the backfield where, you got to run 4 yards to get to the line of scrimmage. That gives those linebackers at least that much of a head start to get there, where you can't really freeze them as you can on your traditional routes if you're in the slot. So I need to see some stuff like that, Vince. I need to see the being more creative with your running backs, being more creative with getting into the alignment you like from different ways, different personnel, different motions, different all those type of things. And then we need to see them come out and really attack them with levels concepts and flood concepts, the stacking them on top of each other. Those are areas where this defense can be vulnerable. Then that also sets up double moves. We're not seeing you're running option routes. You've been real successful with option routes for Michael Mayer. Well, he'll run 8 to 10 yards and just beat a guy on and out. So here's what you do. You do a nod, right? So essentially you're running off the outside guy, right? And you run off the backside outside guy. So you run 2 double verticals on the outside, which you do. Okay. And then you run Mayer on it, and he just goes out like he's running the option. He nod and then go, right? He goes right to the middle of the field. We saw Chip Long run stuff like this, and it would get open. We need to see that with Michael Mayer. You have to have built-in counters to what is good for you, because this team is they're gonna watch and say, man, Michael Mayer killed Cincinnati with those out cuts. He killed Florida State with those out-breaking routes, option routes, and corner routes. So bring something back off of that where you're given some nod and goes. Now, again, part of the issue is protection. That's why you do it with Michael Mayer, not, an outside guy, because if Michael Mayer does that and you got pressure, it's easier to get that ball out over the middle of the field than it is to throw a slant and go way on the outside with a guy in your face. Right. So there's some things that they can do in those alignments that I think would be effective. And so they're going to have to get the eye discipline for Virginia Tech off. They're going to have to create some They're going to have to force Virginia Tech to communicate a lot faster with tempo. That's another thing they need to do.
That's the word. I was waiting for it. That's what I want. I want tempo
with movement.
Yeah.
Because to me, a lot of shifting and motioning, even if you're snapping the ball at 10 seconds, but if you're snapping it as soon as your guy gets across, then you've kind of put them in a situation where, okay, who are they going to be? So if you bring Braden Lindsey on a jet motion and you got a reduced, you got Kevin Austin reduced to the field, for example, or Mayer or whatever, and you bang a corner route with that guy and just send Braden Lindsey on a straight bam arrow route outside, you're catching that sucker and that corner's in a bind. Are you going to go to run with Mayer or are you going to run with the jet? And now Braden's got a full steam ahead. You can do like a little half roll with the quarterback. If you want to get out of the pocket, you can do like a little half sprint out with the quarterback. You get the running back blocking the edge, and bam, you got an ISO out there. You're stealing yards. You see teams do that all the time. You can't do that 15 times, but you can do that 2-3 times. That's the creativity we need to see. Tommy Rees is a really smart guy, but he thinks he's an NFL coach right now. Mm-hmm. And you're running NFL schemes right now, and they're really smart. They're really creative, but you don't have the quarterbacks for that right now because your quarterbacks are in their head. Your best quarterback, it's in his head. He's not really giving you anything right now, and you can't protect it. And you have a bunch of receivers who haven't been taught how to play the game all that effectively. You got one good route runner on your entire lineup right now, and it's a kid that was converted from quarterback.
Yeah, absolutely. He's your reliable receiver right now.
Right.
I want to interject about tempo because you're potentially bringing, let's say they bring in Drew Pine, and so he's your quarterback. So okay, we want to make him as successful as we possibly can. Well, going tempo, one thing it does is it reduces the playbook a little bit, right? Because you're going fast and there's some things that you want to do and you want to be able to get it going quickly, right? That's okay. And I'm not saying reduce the playbook as in it's going to be obvious what you're doing. And that's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is it's quick. It gets guys in when you want them to be in. It gets guys moving, and then we run some motions and things off of that as well. I love tempo, and I think it puts Drew in the best possible situation to be successful because he's going to get kids fired up. He's going to get them moving. He's going to get the ball out of his hands, and you're just going to go, 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 and the defense is going to be on its heels.
I don't disagree with you. I'm going to say one other thing. If they start Jack Cohn, and right now I've actually heard conflicting information from my sources. I had one source tell me, hey, it's going to be Pine. I had another source last night reach out and say, hey, by the way, a little birdie told me that it's going to be Jack Cohn. I have no clue what they're going to do. Really, we'll find out today because today's the first day of practice of the week. We're going to see.
Good point. You're right. They're going to be outside.
They didn't practice yesterday. If Jack Cohn's the starter, I think it's even more important to go tempo because you got to get Jack out of his own head.
Yeah,
and,
good call.
And the best way to do that, and we kind of started to see this in the second series against Wisconsin. We saw this early against Cincinnati. See, I've already blocked that game out of my head, Vince.
Smart.
So disgusted by it.
It's on the floor of the barbershop for me.
Yeah, it is imperative that you just lessen his mental burden right now. And with Drew, I think it's about getting him into an early rhythm and getting them to bite down so then Drew can, maybe hit him over the top and things like that with some quicker type of concepts. With Jack, it's more of it's all the things you said with Jack. It is true for Jack as well, right? Everything you said about Drew is because Drew and Jack are very similar passers.
They are.
Very similar
I agree
passers.
with that.
You're not one thing we talked about summer. You're not running a whole different package with Drew Pine than you are with Jack Cohn. It's going to be a similar offense. It's just you're hoping that Drew's specific ability to run that is more efficient, more effective. So the tempo thing I'm with you on, no matter who the quarterback is. I think it's more imperative, however, if Jack is still your starter or if Jack has to go in because Drew gets hurt. Because it's less thinking for the quarterback too. You're making a quick pre-decision, pre-snap, and you're just going, here's where I'm going with the football. And you're going to get them in more bait because part of the thing about tempo is they can't make their communications and checks and adjustments and things like that I'm
Nailed
coming
it.
out that first series and I'm going quick. I'm going to take a shot early. First 3 or 4 plays, I'm taking a shot, but it's going to be a shot out of the pocket. It's going to be sort of like a half. I'm going to do like a boot, not a naked, but a bootleg where I'm going to get somebody out there with them. Maybe get Jarrett Patterson on like a play action. Maybe run like the fake, the sweep action to the boundary. Have Jarrett be the one to lead him out. And do something like that and have him set up and throw a deep shot where he's getting out of the pocket, because Virginia Tech's going to do what everybody else has done, and they're going to come right up the middle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's where Notre Dame's been vulnerable. So
that's what I would do.
Do a sprint out throwback or something. I mean, some shot where you're getting him out of the pocket and you can let the court, let him wind up and get a shot out. Something like that I want to see early, or a shot where if you're getting cover one, then you just, hey, if you see first time you see cover one, you're throwing a deep ball to Braden Lindsey or Kevin Austin, right? Whoever has the better matchup.
Right.
So those are things that I would do, but I think tempo would be something that would be the thing that would allow Jack to kind of get out of his own head, throw screens early, right? Things where you expect pressure on the screen. You know what I mean? But you actually need to hit somebody. You don't just let them get free runs to the quarterback like they did on Saturday.
Yeah, you got to bump them. You can't just be like, okay, here you go.
Yeah, I'd run the mess out of RPOs in the first series, just things where he's reading it and pulling and throwing, just things where it's just easier decisions. And then I feel like, and this is true for both quarterbacks. Both quarterbacks, if they can get into a nice early rhythm, I'm going to feel good about the offense.
Absolutely.
But I think it's especially true for Jack because his confidence is clearly shot, whereas Drew's is not.
Agreed.
I think Drew could go 0-11 and his confidence wouldn't get shot. I mean,
he's a very confident kid.
He just strikes me as that kind of kid, and that's agree. In case you're wondering, that's a compliment.
100% compliment. Yeah, no doubt.
You want a quarterback. It's like I was, so I started watching Ted Lasso this weekend while my
finally,
wife was gone.
Well done.
The first season I really liked. The second season, I didn't like as much.
Yeah.
But the one it's comment about, be a goldfish. I never thought about that. What is it, the animal with the creature with the shortest attention span? It's a goldfish. Be a goldfish. You want your quarterbacks to be that way. You want your cornerbacks to be that way, right? Those two positions are more than any other. You got to have a short memory, right?
Yep.
And so that's just how Drew is. It's like, okay, I threw a pick last series. I don't give a crap. I'm going to go out there and we're going to score this time. That's just how he is. You need a quarterback to be that way.
Right. No doubt.
So that's what I would do pass game wise. Cause I do think, talent wise, Notre Dame has plenty of opportunities. I mean, Michael Mayer, if healthy, could have a big game this week. I think Braden Lindsey and Kevin Austin, I think Avery Davis is poised to have a really big week this week if used correctly and if the quarterbacks can have some time to throw. We need to see Kevin Austin have another bounce back after a brutal game like he had the last time he had a brutal game.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he's shown he can do that. He's shown he can bounce back, and now he's going to have to do that again. So that's where I'm at, Vince, with this matchup. It's advantage Virginia Tech for me because of this down here. These three areas down here. Notre Dame's inefficiency and right here, and then that right there. I'll say this. If Notre Dame can protect the quarterback in this game, if it can look more like it did in the second half, right? Okay. Again, I think there's reasons for it. I think if it can look like it did in the second half without them having to have 7 guys in blocking, then I think that then I would flip the advantage to Notre Dame. The reason I primarily am going with Virginia Tech is because I don't think Notre Dame can protect the quarterback without sacrificing their weapons.
Right.
And that's why quicks, screens, half rolls, bootlegs, things like that are important. It's like they ran a bootleg against Cincinnati on Saturday. Cincinnati played it. Like, well, throw that out. Like,
right.
What?
Yeah, exactly.
Like they made a good play. Next time you may catch them when they're blitzing off the edge and you've got a big play. I mean, it's like there's no method to the madness of what Notre Dame. Like I've been a very high on Tommy Rees at times this season, but the last couple games it's almost like he's grasping at straws, and I can't blame him. I mean, you can get mad at him all you want, but I can't blame him. There's not a whole lot to dial up when your offensive line can't block anybody.
Right, absolutely. But if they can do what we just outlined, if I see that they're doing that, they're getting the ball out, they're doing the RPOs, they're going a little tempo, then the advantage is to Notre Dame here. Yes. But I haven't seen
those
it
are
yet.
the things that you can do. Like I said, there's not a lot you can do with an offensive line that sucks.
Right.
We've laid out what those few things are that you can do.
Absolutely.
And they've just stubbornly
not done it.
Not done.
And my confidence level is low that they're going to do it. So I have to give the advantage to Virginia Tech here.
Because the advantage is based on what we've seen.
Right. You
and
have
what
to do
we've
that
seen
way.
so far is that Virginia Tech's been a better pass defense in there. Because if you look at the number, you say, well, Notre Dame ranks higher in yards per game. Yeah, but look at that next number. That one right there. That's because Notre Dame's throwing the ball a ton.
Right.
And when you throw the ball a ton, you're going to get your yards. I mean, that's just a fact. When you throw the ball as much as Notre Dame has thrown the ball this year, they threw the ball 46 times on Saturday. They haven't completed over 57% of their passes since the Toledo game. And they were under 50 against Purdue, and they were at 50 against Cincinnati, and they were 21-37 against Wisconsin, right? And then the other part of this too is the receivers are going to have to play to their game this week. They're going to have to no stupid drops. Give me some kind of press release. You know what I mean? You can come over to my house for 20 minutes on Wednesday after practice, and in my backyard, I can teach you how to press release in 20 minutes.
Exactly.
It ain't hard. It just has to be something you work on, So we'll see. I'm kidding about that. Notre Dame players aren't coming over to my house on Wednesday after practice.
I mean, I go pick them up.
Yeah. Yeah, because I live so far away. So advantage Virginia Tech in this one. But if they can protect the quarterback, that's where Notre Dame will get the advantage. So let's wrap up here, Vince, with the scoring offense against the scoring defense. This is the biggest mismatch on paper right here, because actually Notre Dame's numbers, that 30.8 at 58th ranking is a tad misleading
because it was all defensive points in Wisconsin.
Right. If Notre Dame didn't have that, they would be averaging 26.6 points per game. If you take away those three, that would rank them 83rd with Western Michigan.
Yeah, that's where they belong. Yeah. That's where the scoring offense belongs. And we touted that this offense had the possibility of breaking the modern day record for scoring and blah, 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 blah.
Looking pretty stupid now.
We're looking real dumb right now because we had no idea that the offensive line could be this poor. And that's really what it comes down to.
We did. And deep in our minds, we did.
I didn't think it was going to be this bad. I didn't. I knew they were going to take a step back from last year. And again, we were having discussions about the offensive line in 2019, but they weren't this bad. You know what I mean? And I thought that, okay, maybe they'll regress to 2019, but not to where they are now. I mean, just Is
it like every time we mention RPO, this comment comes up?
Yes, I saw it too.
I'm going to explain it again, Joel, or I'm going to say it again.
Searcher Green actually came to our defense and said it's not always the quarterback doing the running.
Our RPO, run pass option. Okay. I just want to make it clear. And Joel, I would encourage you to search for the RPO 101, the football 101 we did it on an RPO. Actually, Vince, while I'm explaining,
you want me to find the link?
Can you find that link? If you just go to our page and type in, if you go to our admin page, and at the top of the search button, if you just type in RPO, the two will come out. Find the one that I did. And Joel, we'll put it in here for you. RPO and read zone are two different things. Now, there are concepts in which you can do an RPO that is like a triple option where it's a run, pass, or keep option by the quarterback. But an RPO is essentially you are executing a running play with your running back. Okay, so like you can run our inside zone, you can run outside zone. I've heard Nick Saban say that he doesn't like outside zone with RPOs. I do, and his offensive coordinator last year did, Steve Sarkisian. You can run it off buck sweep. You can run it off really any action you can run it off of. Notre Dame tends to run it a lot on their inside zone. Is when they run it a lot. But essentially, you are blocking a called run play. So inside zone, outside zone, whatever. And so then the quarterback pre-snap is going to get his eyes on whatever defender they've decided. It could be an overhang player. It could be a linebacker. It could be a safety. It just depends on what your read is for the run versus the passes that you have incorporated. Now, your pass concepts have to be built on what works against a specific defense. But essentially, the offensive line and the running back are running a running play. So if you call an RPO, and I've got Kyron Williams in the game, the R is for Kyron, not Jack Cohn. Alabama had a quarterback last year in Mac Jones who going into the playoff had -9 rushing yards on the season. Okay. And they ran RPOs as much as about any team in the country last year. Alabama did. It has nothing to do with the quarterback running per se. Now, can you make it to where you have the quarterback running? Absolutely, you can. But it's not about the quarterback running. It's about handing it off to a running back, or based on what that guy does, pulling it and throwing it outside.
Yes.
Sometimes in Ian Book, when Ian Book did it a lot in 2018, he would actually make the decision before the snap, because it would be like a quick out to Chase Claypool. The corner would be off and there's nobody in the window. So you just catch it. And I mean, the running back's running, doing his thing, but you just catch it and just get it out quickly.
Just go, because the outside guys are running routes and they're ready to catch the ball. I mean,
And so, like the RPO that Notre Dame did on Saturday, where they were running the inside zone with the double wide stack, if you were going to throw that, you weren't going to carry out the fake. You were just going to pull it and throw it. You were just going to catch it and throw it. Okay. So that's what an RPO is. It has not a read zone is when you are carrying out the fake and reading like the end. If he crashes, the quarterback pulls and gets it outside. Okay. But that's not the case. And then, but here's the thing with that comment searcher is
not with Notre Dame.
Not with Notre Dame. Not a problem at Notre Dame. Not a problem at all at Notre Dame. No. Number two, a lot of Notre Dame's RPOs are quick game based RPOs. You're seeing more of that being called down the field. Notre Dame had that called against them, and it was a bad call.
Right.
Because if you engage with a guy at the line and you drive him downfield,
that's not a player downfield.
That shouldn't be an ineligible man downfield, and that's exactly what happened. However, a lot of teams, like especially the air raid teams, they will throw post routes off RPO.
Right.
Like Jared Goff got hit like 30 times in his last year at Cal, throwing backside post routes. I mean, he would get it off, but he would take shots. Throwing deep post routes off RPOs. Notre Dame doesn't do that. And when they do, it's quick. So I talked about how they did that in 17 and 18 with Wimbush and Ian Book, but it would be quick. It'd be like ride it, and that safety comes out, and you're pulling it, and you're throwing a real quick post. It's not like a skinny post over top. I'm pulling that sucker and going.
Right.
So it's not really an issue at Notre Dame unless they're just being dumb.
It's also not an issue because they get no push. So.
Right. I mean, a guy just starts waddling downfield for no reason because there's nowhere to block. You know what I mean? You've watched this line play. You know exactly where I'm coming from.
I know exactly where you're coming from. We do have a super chat I want to get to, Brian.
Yeah, pull them up. I've had a couple. I want to make sure
Bill.
we're listening.
Bill says, I would never downplay the game plan and fundamentals, technique, but this might be a game where one of the biggest factors is an Irish, quote, manhood check, unquote. And you know what? After last week, I don't disagree with you because it's not everybody, obviously. It's not everybody. And so I don't want to throw everybody under the bus, but just an overall feeling that Notre Dame just wasn't there to play. Like I did not have that feeling that everybody was fired up and, so I don't disagree with you, Bill. I kind of like where you're coming from here.
I'm going to somewhat disagree with you a little bit.
Okay.
Just because I just like disagreeing with you sometimes, Vince. We agree too much. Sometimes I got to disagree. But in all seriousness, and I actually think you'll agree with where I'm coming from. I don't disagree with you that there needs to be from a leadership standpoint amongst the players. Hey guys, and I'll be honest with you. I was told this at times in 2018 that like during the 2018 season where the guys were like, hey, I don't care what they say. I don't care what coaches are doing. I don't care about whatever. We're going to go out and play. Right. This wasn't because of a lack of faith in the coaches. It was more of hey, you had leadership that said it doesn't matter what the coaches call or what the coaches do. This is up to us to go out there and out hustle, out hit, out fight, out scrap, out claw. That's what I mean by that in 2018. The way I initially said it, it came across as like I was saying, like they didn't have faith in their coaches. And I'm going to get to that point. That's not what I mean in 2018. It was more of hey, it doesn't matter what they call. This is up to us to get it done.
Yeah,
okay?
Right.
When I watch this team play, like there's, especially on offense, more so than defense, like there's a colossal lack of confidence in themselves and what's being given to them. I don't think there's a lot of confidence, in my opinion, on offense right now in the leadership. And when you don't think you're being put in a position to be successful, it's going to be real hard for you to kind of man up and say, hey, let's go do this. Because you're like, yeah, okay, I'm going to go play hard. But then We're gonna have some dumb play call that's gonna get us beat, or the offensive line's not gonna block, and it's hard for me to kind of say, well, hey, you're 18, 19, 20. If you don't have faith in the guy next to you, that you're going to need to do that. But I think the other thing that I see too, Vince, where I do agree with you is I don't know if, as much as I love the defense, I don't know if there's an Alohi Gilman on this defense right now. I don't know if there's a Drew Tranquil on this defense right now. Somebody that's is gonna get in your face,
right,
and demand more.
Right.
And that's a big question that I have about the defense. Because the one thing about that 2018 defense is whenever they got into a situation where they needed a stop, they always came up with a stop. Right?
Mm-hmm.
This team has the one flaw of this defense has been that hasn't been how they are. I mean, they gave away a lead late in the fourth quarter against Toledo. They gave a lead to Wisconsin in the fourth quarter. Look what they did against Florida State, allowing Florida State to get back in. Look at this past weekend against Cincinnati.
Yeah.
That's a question mark. And
it's a disturbing trend now that you put it all together like that.
And I need to see who the players are.
Yeah.
Who are gonna be the Alohi Gilman of 2018, the Drew Tranquil of 2018, that are gonna say, "Hey boys, this is on us. I don't care what Coach Freeman calls. We're gonna go out there and dominate on this play." And I don't see that kind of fire on this defense consistently enough. And so,
agreed.
That part I agree with you on. My concern with offense is, as you very well know, if you don't have faith in the people leading you, it's like, do you really want to go in that battle when you know this plan is flawed?
Sure.
Do you really want to leave it all out there when you know the result's probably going to be getting punched right in the face? If I'm a quarterback. So that's something where they're going to have to win back the trust of the players. But that's also going to have to be where leadership says, hey, this isn't about them, right? I don't care what they call. You go out and physically beat that guy in front of you. It doesn't matter what they call. I don't know if that leadership exists right now on the football team. And that is a bit of a concern for me.
Sure. We got a couple comments I just want to roll through here real quick, Brian. We have to give our advantage, right?
Yes.
We have to give our advantage here. I'll go first since you went first the last couple times. Until I see something different, I've got to go advantage Virginia Tech here. Notre Dame's got to score some points offensively. They have to, and they've done worse and worse and worse and worse every single game. And they have to put it in the end zone. They have to do a better job of that.
Yeah.
They haven't done it, and they need to be more efficient. They haven't done it, and until they do, it's advantage Virginia Tech for me.
Notre Dame has gone from 41 to 32 to 27 to 20 to 13 points on offense.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, like literally have, like, you talk about getting worse each game, like literally they've gotten quantifiably worse. Now, the only difference is at least last week they went up in yards compared to the previous week. Still. But but it was still down from the previous 4 games, like 3 games.
Right.
So like yards per game, it was 431, then 449, then 343, then down to 242, and then back up to 341. Yards per play went 6.2, 6.0, 5.2, 3.5, 4.6. So they've gotten progressively worse. Teams have got the book on them, and until they can prove that they have enough, that this coaching staff is good enough to say, hey, look, let's think outside the box. Without just – there's a right and a wrong way to change what you're doing. The wrong way is to just start throwing a bunch of new crap out there, like protections you've never used or schemes you've never used, or we're going to just we're going to go turn into an air raid now. I mean, that's not what we're talking about. It's about taking what you have, and maybe your emphasis is going to shift.
Yes, exactly.
Because of what the strengths of your team. They have these floods and levels concepts. They've used them effectively this year. They're just still too much oriented on horizontal stretch as opposed to vertical stretches, right? Horizontal meaning left to right, vertical meaning, top down. And so the things are there. We're not asking for them to reinvent the wheel. We're asking for you to shift your emphasis. We know you can go to 11 personnel. We know you can go 20 personnel. We know you can go 21 personnel. We know you can get your running backs lined up outside. All those different things that we've seen them do. It's just do that stuff more and then do some wrinkles within that. Add some adjustments within that. You have the option concept. It's okay to add the nod to it if you haven't already done that. That's easy. It takes a day of practice. So I've done that with D3 kids. If my D3 receivers can do that, why can't the Notre Dame receivers do that? Your high school receiver.
Yep.
The point being, it's not a shot on the Notre Dame players. It's just those things are fixable during the season. Changing from a pro style offense to an air raid is not, I'm just using that hypothetically.
Sure.
Is not what you're going to do. You're not going to all of a sudden start running a million read zones if you haven't practiced read zone. You know what I mean? So the things that we're asking them to do is more of shift your emphasis. If they shift their emphasis, then they can have the advantage in this game. But going based off what we have seen now, Vince, there's no way anyone that's being objective, anyone that's being honest in their evaluation can say that Notre Dame has an advantage based on what they've done. And it's not just about numbers. Context matters. Right, but Virginia Tech's played some pretty good offenses so far this year, and they've at least played one, and they did a pretty good job in that game.
Right. Yep.
And they held North Carolina. What was it? 7 points.
Yeah.
North Carolina went out and scored 59 the next two games. Right.
Right.
So until is Notre Dame capable of winning this matchup? You betcha.
Absolutely. Yes. They're favored still, I believe. I mean, they should be.
Can I give them the advantage right now? No, I can't. So
I will just D-Rock had some pretty funny stuff in there. School related that nobody else is going to understand, but I appreciate it, D-Rock, because we both come from an education background, and we actually had our SPED BIP signings this morning, so you'll appreciate that. So I understand exactly where you're coming from. But I don't know if you want to stick around, Brian, but I've got to hit the road.
I'm gonna get a couple comments here.
Okay, cool. Everybody, I appreciate you joining us. Hey, we're looking forward here. We're moving forward. We got the defense versus the Virginia Tech offense tomorrow. That's going to be a lot of fun. So make sure you come back tomorrow at 12:30. I will see everybody tomorrow. But it's been a lot of fun, man. Thanks.
So everybody willing to still stick around with just me. I do want to work through some questions here today. I know there were some comments about some things about the message board, some things I put on the message board. So I do want to kind of get to this stuff. But let me get back up here. I'm going to find these. This was an interesting one that I saw. Mark Krogan says, call me crazy, but I think this will be a higher scoring game because it's a night game along with other reasons, but still. Mark, I'd be curious what your other reasons are. I wanted to ask you this, what your other reasons why you think it'll be a high scoring game? Because right now when I look at it, if it's a high scoring game, that's going to make me real concerned about the Notre Dame defense. We'll get into that tomorrow. But I would imagine you're maybe saying like this is the game the offense puts it all together, but I have a hard time saying that after what we've seen from this team the last couple weeks. Get to a couple of these questions. D-Rock says this. I thought this was a good observation. I think this game may be the most pivotal one we have that will define the rest of the season. I agree. Drew says, I'd like to see them do screens and bubbles and get some of the young kids out there. The older class seems like they just don't care. I wouldn't agree with that part. I think they care. I just don't think they're prepared to be successful on offense, to be honest with you. Clashmore Mike said, these are some of the interesting things I saw during the show that I wanted to get up. Clashmore Mike says, except for Patterson, I'd go with an all freshman offensive lineman and Baker because they're the least contaminated by Quinn. That says a lot about, I thought this just made me laugh. I thought this was really funny, Mike, and I appreciated you putting this out because Vince and I have kind of made jokes about that. It's kind of like, okay, Joe Alt's dad played in the NFL. Rocco Spindler's dad played in the NFL, and Caleb Johnson's dad, I believe, played in the NFL, or at least played college football on the offensive line. So it's like these guys are probably the 3 most well-coached offensive linemen that they have. So because of their dads. So I got a kick out of that. I don't think we'll see that. I wouldn't necessarily do that. I think there's other guys like Andrew Kristofic, and you mentioned Tosh Baker who can play, but yeah, I think it's time to really rethink that part of that side of the ball. I think one of the things I wanted to address honestly and seriously with this comment is, I'm not a big fan of when there's coaching problems of replacing a lot of players. That's part of my hesitancy to replace Jack Cohn. In my heart of hearts, I know it needs to be done, but my frustration is because I'm getting a little pissed at the manner in which a lot of fans are attacking Jack Cohn. Jack Cohn sucks. And it really bothers me because I feel like as a fan base, we're better than that, because it's yes, Jack's not playing well, but it's not Jack. It's what's happening around him. It's the people making all the money that are doing a piss poor job of putting him in position to be successful. And that's not going to change when Drew Pine goes in the game. And it's the same thing on the offensive line. I feel bad for Kane Madden. Vince and I were the 2 people on the beat that from the day Notre Dame started looking at him, we were like, he ain't that guy, because we watched the film. When Notre Dame was looking at him, I sent Vince film, 3 games worth of film of Kane Madden, and said, hey, just watch this. I didn't give him my opinion. I didn't say anything to him. I had 2 buddies of mine who coach offensive linemen. I sent them game film. I said, hey, just what do you think of this kid, without telling them what I thought of him? And everybody came back with the same opinion. He's not overly athletic. He's kind of short, and he struggles with really athletic linemen, but he's going to play a lot of athletic linemen, right? But we all also said the same thing. He's real tough, and he's fundamentally sound. That's what we all said. Me, Vince, former coaches, and 2 people that are very, really good offensive line people. And we all said the same thing: tough and fundamentally sound. As a 6-year senior at Notre Dame, he is not fundamentally sound anymore. I'm supposed to blame Kane Madden, who was fundamentally sound at Marshall, and just say it's all on him? Or is it Jeff Quinn's fault? So we're not getting the best of Kane Madden. He needs to be replaced because he's ineffective. But I don't blame him, and that's what makes me feel bad about saying we need to replace him. I never felt bad about benching players when I was coaching, because I kind of felt like, as a coach, that I've coached you all very well and you're not getting it done. And so I would make changes. I mean, one of the groomsmen in my wedding was a former player of mine who was a returning starter at fullback who I benched, but because it was the right thing to do and the manner in which you do it, you can still keep that relationship. But I felt like other guys needed to play. And so when I look at this, I say, yeah, other guys need to play, right? But at the same time, it's not going to matter a whole lot who plays and who gets replaced if the coaching doesn't improve. Having said that, if you're going to have a poorly coached line, then you flat out absolutely 100% need to put your 5 most talented football players in the field. The reason I say that is because if you're putting your most talented players in the field, they're still going to have good plays just because of their talent. That's why I've been so pro Tosh Baker, even though he gives up bad plays. Because when Tosh is on, he's really good. That's why I want to see Rocco Spindler. Look, I know he's a freshman. I know he'll make mistakes, but so's Kane Madden, Josh Lugg, Jarrett Patterson, Zeke Crow, and everybody else you put on the offensive line. So play Rocco, because he's at least talented to where those snaps, when he's right, he's going to be really impressive in those snaps. And, that's why I consider putting Josh Lugg at guard and putting Joe Wald at right tackle. Get your most talented guys on the field, because if your veterans are making mistakes and they're not as talented as other guys, then there's no reason to have them on the field. Put your most talented guys on the field, because experience clearly means nothing to this football team. Technique clearly means nothing to this football team on offense. So put your most talented guys on the field. And yes, there is the joke that goes along with it that they're the least contaminated by Quinn, but I think they're also your most physically gifted players at spots. And I think Andrew Kristofic should play. I think that Joe Alt should play, and I'm okay playing 5 or 7 guys. I'm okay with a rotation. I'm usually not, but there's nobody on this offensive line outside of Jarrett Patterson that's flat out played well enough to say you deserve every single rep at this position. Not one outside of Patterson. This is another question. Another that I wanted to address. So somebody asked me, and I'm curious. This kind of frustrated me too. This is so I put something on the message board, and I'm not going to give too much of it here because I do think it's one of those things that because I'm giving some real behind the scenes stuff. I think I want to keep it behind a paywall, but essentially, it speaks to just the at times incompetence that's happened in the dysfunction that's happened at Notre Dame. And I was thinking about this that Notre Dame had an opportunity to have a coaching staff right now that had Joe Moorhead as your OC and Joe Gilbert, who's the offensive line coach of the Buccaneers, as your O-line coach, with Phil Jurkovec as your starting quarterback. But even if it was just Phil Jurkovec, that would have been really good. This team would be really dangerous. But even then, you look at Phil Jurkovec and you say, even if just Phil stayed, he's the starting quarterback in Notre Dame right now. That's the perfect guy you want behind this abysmal offensive line. Phil showed last year that he can make a ton of plays behind a bad offensive line that gets him hit all the time because he's big. He can bounce off sacks. He's not afraid of getting hit. He'll move out of the pocket. He'll throw the ball downfield. But they blew it. Phil left because of his relationship with Tommy Rees and Brian Kelly. And if you're still living in the fantasy world that it was because of Chip Long, I have news for you. I can tell you with 100% certainty that Phil Jurkovec did not leave because of Chip Long. Chip Long was fired in December. Phil Jurkovec transferred in like mid-January, mid to late January. He was gone. Tommy Rees and Brian Kelly were the reason that relationship faltered in the first place. They had an opportunity to repair it. They chose not to. And that's a big reason why we're in the situation that we're in now. And I think that is something that has been on my mind a lot as I watch the performance of this offensive line. Be like, I think the only thing that could rescue this offensive line is a big 6'5", 240-pound quarterback with a big arm and a pretty good athlete that can handle the pressure. And so I wanted to address that one too. Jay Wiki Jr. said, did anyone see BK defending Quinn at his presser? I don't understand openly criticizing players but not calling out coaches responsible for getting the best out of said players. I don't mind him defending him to a degree, but, there does come a point in time where you have to be able to say, hey, look, we're not getting the job done. It's got to be better. And when you say some of the things that Brian Kelly has said, like trying to blame the quarterbacks and the running backs and everybody else for the play of the offensive line, you lose credibility. And I think that's what Brian Kelly risks right now. You lose credibility with fans, the media, and more importantly, your players. Because if you're willing to criticize them publicly, but you're not willing to criticize the coaches who make a lot of money, I'm sorry, that's going to cause you to lose some of your players. And I know with confidence I can say that there are a lot of players a lot meaning like at least enough to where it can matter, that are getting really frustrated by that because they see it. This is another thing David Trudeau said, one loss shouldn't equal giving up on the season. I also want to address that because there's a notion that like, well, the one loss, they're not playing for a championship, so just put all the young guys in. Now, that's a bad way of looking at it. Number one, that's completely unfair to your veterans who have earned starting jobs, and this season is an opportunity for them to play their last season at Notre Dame, but also some of these guys are trying to play for a chance to play professional football. It'd be completely unfair to bench them simply because you're going young. I'm all for benching guys who aren't performing, but I'm not benching guys just to develop for next season. I think that's unfair. I also think that there's still a lot for Notre Dame to play for. There is a lot of opportunities, not just the playoff, but look, it's national championship or bust for your ultimate goal, but your ultimate goal doesn't have to just be this year. There's also lessons that you need to teach this football team now. And even some of the guys that aren't on your team next year, there's lessons you need to teach this team now about working and winning and competing and bouncing back from adversity. And if the first time you lose a game and, we can't make a championship, you just kind of give up and throw the season away, What lesson have you taught your football team? Hey, when adversity strikes, just quit, move on to the next thing. That's a horrible, horrible lesson to teach your football team. And it's just not accurate. Like, do I think Notre Dame is going to make the playoff? No. After what we've seen in 5 games, do I think Notre Dame has any business being in the playoff conversation? No. But there's enough football of the season left to where that is still an outside possibility. Look, there's a lot of teams right now. I'd still rather be Notre Dame than Clemson, right? Clemson's got 2 losses. There's a lot of things this team still has to play for. There's New Year's Six Bowl. There's finishing strong. I mean, you want to send yourself into the offseason with some momentum. You've got a great schedule next year. So I see a lot of people that are kind of ready to give up on the season. And I think David hits the nail on the head that one loss does not at all determine that the season is over and it's time to just throw the young guys in. The reason I'm advocating for doing that on the offensive line is because I genuinely think that's what gives them the best chance to beat Virginia Tech. It's not about getting them ready for next season. It's about, I think, doing that, getting some of these older guys who are just completely just not bringing you anything right now, gives you an opportunity to be successful. When I say Deion Colsey and Lorenzo Styles need to play more, it's not that I'm anti-Braden Lindsey or Kevin Austin. I'm still riding with those guys. But I think, as I said before the season, number one, I don't want them to be playing as many snaps as they're playing. And number two, when you have talented players like them, you need to play them. And then now that keeps Braden and Kevin fresher in the fourth quarter. It's going to keep them fresher in November. It's still about winning right now. And when I talk about getting Logan Diggs in the game, it's about winning right now. I think he can help you win right now. I still believe that needs to be the emphasis of what this football team is all about. So those are a couple of things that I wanted to kind of address. I don't see any more here. There might have been a couple others that I saw, but I wanted to address a couple of those issues here real quick. All right, here we go. We did have a super chat. Martin says, time to get, this is our friend who's an usher down at the stadium. Martin, I was not at the game this weekend. That's why I didn't come see you. It says, time to get back on the horse. Thank you for your super chat as well. Time to get back on the horse. Have you guys seen the In the Garage podcast with Hamilton Wallace and Cam Hart? Give a great look at the real young men in that uniform. Hey, fans, it's time to get rid of the negative. I have not seen that. I don't watch that show. I don't really have time to watch any other podcasts, to be completely honest with you. Yeah, I haven't seen that, but I encourage those things. I mean, look, my only concern is I want to make sure that those things aren't getting in the way of what they need to do in the classroom and on the football field. But if you can work that in there and do it, I think it's a great opportunity for fans to get another side of this team. And I think getting the player's perspective is good. I think it is a good thing. So I'm glad they're doing it, as long as it's not, again, they're student athletes. Those two things have to come first, in my opinion. So, yeah, and there's a couple other things here that I did see. Nicholas says, no college player should be attacked personally. Yes, he made mistakes. The goal line pass was horrible against his head. Doesn't make him a bad kid. Look, I don't know if I'd say anybody's attacked him personally. I just feel like when you say like he sucks, that's just a useless response. Like, you're bringing no analysis, you're bringing no reasonable conversation. You're just being insulting. And look, sometimes kids suck. Jack Cohn doesn't suck. Jack Cohn is not playing well. There's a difference. And some of the manner in which some people have gone after him is disappointing, especially on this channel, because I feel like I take pride in just how many people on this channel talk ball and bring some insight into the table. And then, so when a couple people want to jump in and just keep repeating the same things over and over and over and over and over again, it brings down the discussion. And I don't want, I don't like that. But being critical, I hope, and I know you're not saying this, but being critical of a player's performance is not a personal attack. And I don't think that you're saying that. All right. And Drew St. Blaise said, do you see Quinn being fired? And if so, what would be the best direction you would go after that? Someone said earlier that if Saban was coach, he'd bench players or take away duties from coaches. Well, yeah, I mean, we've seen, Ryan Day took away defensive play calling duties from Kerry Coombs. I mean, we see coaches make those changes. The problem is when you're replacing a coordinator, as we saw with Brian Van Gorder, we talked about this, I believe, yesterday. You can promote your D-line coach or your linebackers coach or somebody else to call plays. There's really not anybody else on staff capable of being the full-time offensive line coach in Notre Dame. I don't think the GA is ready for that role just yet. I don't see any scenario in which Harry Heastan is brought back to mentor that young man. It is what it is. Do I see Jeff Quinn being fired? I've heard that another podcast had said that they believe he's going to be fired. I have not heard anything like that myself. I would be skeptical of it. I think the only way that Jeff Quinn gets fired is if Brian Kelly is put in the same situation he was put in with Brian Van Gorder after the season. And that is, hey, changes need to be made. What's happening right now is unacceptable. We didn't spend all this money on an indoor facility, and they're going to renovate the Goog and the stadium and all this other stuff so that you can, be this. There's higher expectations. And so this is O-line U, and what we're seeing this year is embarrassing, and something needs to be done about it besides just benching players. So that would be a surprise to me. Now, what I think could happen is I could see a scenario. I was told that I think it was when Chip Long was hired, I was told that Brian Kelly tried to convince him to put Jeff Quinn as the receivers coach. And he was like, no, I want to bring in Dell because Dell knew his offense. And that just shows you Brian Kelly's just strong desire to have Jeff Quinn on staff some way, shape, form, or fashion. So what I could see happening is if, let's say John McNulty goes back to the NFL, I could see a scenario in which he just moves Jeff Quinn over to tight ends and hires a new O-line coach. I'd be real surprised if Jeff Quinn gets fired. I think the more likely option is that Jeff Quinn is reassigned somewhere to another position and he brings in a new O-line coach, which I think has to be done, in my opinion, from a recruiting standpoint and especially from a coaching standpoint. So I'd be a little surprised by that. All right, good last couple things, and I think we're ready to get out of here. I like this comment from Sawyer Leonard. We should play the best players who give us a chance to win. Tell Saban when Bama loses a couple games to give up the season, and he would laugh at you. Winning every day, that's a book by Lou. Read it. I don't know what Nick Saban would do if he loses a couple games because he hasn't done that in the regular season since 2011 or 2010. But to your point, it's correct, is because losing a game doesn't mean you abandon this season, because then you lose your culture and you're trying to build something. And adversity is a part of that culture. You teach players to give up on a season now. What happens if they lose to Ohio State in the opener next year? Do you tell them that the season's over then? Or do you try to say, no. Well, last year was different because of, A, B, C, D excuse. No, you say, hey, look, we still have a lot to play for. We still have a championship on our belt. If I'm Brian Kelly, I'm going to sit there. Do you think Brian Kelly should sit there in the locker room with his players after this game and say, guys, our title chances are over? Or should he say, hey, fellas, we're going to need some help now because of our mistakes this weekend as coaches and our failure to execute as players? We all lost this weekend, right? Not just us coaches, not just you players. We all lost. But you look around the country, 9 top 25 teams got beat this week. There are not a lot of undefeated teams left in college football right now. Fellas, there's still a lot to play for. There's still 7 games left, plus conference title games for a lot of other teams, right? So we are going to go out there. We're going to keep playing. There's 1 undefeated team left in the ACC. There's only 2 undefeated teams left in the Big 12, and they still have to play each other, obviously. There's 4 undefeated teams in the Big 10 conference. 3 of them all play each other at some point in time. Ohio State already has a loss, right? I'm just going through it, right? We go down to the Pac-12. There's nobody left undefeated in the Pac-12. Every Pac-12 team has 1 loss. There's 3 undefeated teams left in the SEC. That's it. There's not a lot of undefeated teams left. So we got to keep handling our business. We got to, obviously, we're going to need some help, but we're still going to go out there and trying to compete for a championship. In your heart of hearts, you may not actually believe that, but you need them to believe that, because that's the lesson. That's what they're striving for. That's the excellence that you have to demand from them on a daily basis. So if you just start benching guys and playing young guys and we're preparing for the future, they're going to know that. And you're going to lose a lot of your team. And you're also going to create a really negative culture of when adversity strikes, you give up. You can't do that. You have to go out there and treat this Virginia Tech game like, hey, this is now the next biggest game on our schedule. Not like just another game. I hate that, just another game, but this is the next big game on our schedule. We got to be prepared because we got aspirations, and those aspirations are on life support right now, but they're still alive. And we got to go out there and prepare for that, whether you actually believe that or not. But the reality is it is true. What I just said is true. Do I think Notre Dame is a playoff team right now? No. Do I think Notre Dame can still become the team that we thought they could be? Maybe. But you got to work to at least try to get there. That's how you instill a championship culture in your program that may not help you this year, but is definitely going to help you next year. Just putting in young guys and getting them experience is not nearly as important to me as establishing a championship culture that comes from accountability, and you got to create that. I don't know if Brian Kelly's capable of doing that, but it also comes from teaching them how to overcome adversity. And sometimes that's going to mean change. That means we got to have a new quarterback or a new right guard or new whatever. That can be part of it. But just these wholesale play the young guys just because, that you're going to lose your football team. And that's going to linger into the offseason and linger into next season. And that's how you ruin the culture that you've created. So I do not believe that is the direction they should go at all. So that's going to be it for today's show. I appreciate everybody for being a part of the show today. Appreciate everybody coming in and joining. And the discussion was great in there. I wanted to get to some of your questions because you guys had a lot of great points, a lot of great comments, a lot of things coming up. I did want to tell you all that I know there's been some talk about, Harry Hiestan's role with the team in past seasons. I've hinted about that before. I don't really want to go out with it, but it is on our message board, our premium message board. So if you want to check that out, if you have paid for the premium board, but you don't get on it much, go on there, look for the intel piece about Harry Hiestan in the offensive line and Chris Watt and all that. And I have some stuff on there. If you haven't signed up yet, that's the kind of thing you're missing. So you should definitely sign up. You can find us at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So anyway, everybody, thanks so much for being with us. Hit the like button, subscribe button, notification bell, and check out our message board down there. And obviously check out irishbreakdown.com. So appreciate y'all being with us. We'll talk to you again tomorrow, 12:30 Eastern, to talk about the Notre Dame defense against the Cincinnati offense.